All right, welcome into a special edition of the Goodman and Hummel podcast. I'm Jeff Goodman. Hummel's making it 2 weeks in a row, and he's grinding it out here from his hotel room in Cincinnati before doing the TBT. So don't let anybody tell you that Robbie Hummel's gone soft, because he is actually working here. And we've got NCAA head of championships, Dan Gavitt. I don't even know what your official title is now, Dan, but we appreciate you coming on, spending some time with us to address, talk about some of the big topics in college hoops right now during the slow time, right?
Yeah. Well, it's great to be with you guys, and thanks for the opportunity. Always good to talk college hoops in the middle of summer.
No doubt, no doubt. Keep it moving here. All right, let's start with kind of, to me, the biggest, especially for you, the biggest hot button topic, which is tournament expansion, right? I mean, it went to 64 back in 85, then expanded in 2011 to what it is currently. A lot of people are talking now about trying to get it to 90. I mean, listen, coaches would rather, they'd have it at 256 if they could, some of these guys. I like it the way it is, Dan. I do. But I will say this. Rob Senderoff of Kent State had a great conversation with me recently, and I've kind of come around to, here's my idea. My idea is like a play-in type deal for the last 8 spots, where you have 8 mids play 8 highs in order to get in those final 8 spots, which I think would be fascinating. And it's always the big discussion, right? It's always, well, do you take the high major that finished 9th in its league, or are you taking the mid-major that won its league but didn't win its league tournament? So kind of take me through your thought right now of, I know you guys met earlier this month, and the words "not imminent" came out with regards to expansion.
Sure. Well, yeah, the men's basketball committee and women's basketball committee both met their summer meetings last week. Men were in Las Vegas. And it was a main topic of discussion. It was on the agenda to be a summer topic. That's the annual meeting that they cover the most significant topics around the tournament. Of course, you guys know this was a recommendation that came from the NCAA Transformation Committee to have as much as 25% of the number of schools that sponsor a sport have access to the NCAA championship. Julie Cromer from Ohio University and Greg Sankey from the SEC chaired that committee. And so there's an obligation by the committees to review and consider that recommendation. Of course, for basketball, that means as many as 90 teams in a tournament. Think 96 if you're going to do a round number. I don't know, still today, how much appetite there is for that kind of consideration of expansion or not. But there was really good discussion last week at a real high level. Didn't get into a lot of detail because it was just really the first time that they had talked about expansion. We're going to take the rest of the summer and fall into the early winter to do a much deeper dive and study what benefits, challenges, even goals of expansion are. Like, why would you expand? What are you trying to achieve? Are you creating greater value? Is the experience for the players as good or better than it is right now? So a lot of kind of high level goals and objectives first and foremost, and then get into the details of what a format could look like and things like that, if indeed there's an appetite. The idea you present, Jeff, there's a lot of ideas out there, right? I mean, that's an interesting one. I think from a television perspective, there may be some interest in that kind of, David and Goliath matchup, those last teams under consideration, essentially playing their way into the regular bracket. But there's a lot to consider, anyone that thinks it's an easy answer really doesn't understand the complexity of the tournament and making sure that it's, that it's as popular and as engaging as it has always been. The bracket's a big part of that. When you start playing games soon after Selection Sunday, right now we're playing the first game in Dayton and first 4 less than 48 hours after the field is announced. If you were to expand by a big number, for example, it might very much impact that conference championship weekend or when Selection Sunday is, because you have the like the logistical and operational challenge of getting teams from their campus to a site to practice, to rest, and to be ready to play in a national championship. So a lot to consider, but I do think the time is appropriate to give it consideration. As you've probably heard me say, my 10 plus years at the NCAA now, there's never really been any serious consideration given by the committee to expand. Hasn't been any appetite. It's come up once or twice, but the conversation's been quite short. But this is a little different time. I think it's going to take more due diligence this time and more consideration. And so they will, but really don't know what the outcome will be. And
hey, Dan, just remember, just because there's a million bowl games doesn't mean people give a about a million bowl games. So like I hate how
there's the guy who doesn't really like college football. Like speak for yourself.
No, I just don't like how college basketball coaches are all like, well, look at the amount of teams that are in a bowl game in college football. Like, just because they're doing it doesn't mean that's a good system. Like, I love the tournament for what it is. Actually, I really loved it at 64. I don't know about you, Rob.
I mean, I'm the 68 to me, the playing games are interesting on, I think, for the Tuesday and Wednesday. I wanted to ask Dan, have you been surprised maybe by some of the public, I don't want to call it backlash, but maybe negativity to just the topic of expansion?
I don't know if I've been surprised, Robbie. I mean, I think we've heard a lot of that from media members who follow the sport so closely.
Like Jeff? Yeah, Jeff, maybe why I've heard so much negativity,
and fans too, though. I mean, I think the rhythm of the tournament is something that people enjoy and embrace right now, and I think one of the other underlying factors there too is that it's so competitive right now. Even first four, we've had 2 number 1 seeds go down now. We have number 2 seeds, that are on the ropes frequently. Like, there's magic to that, right? And if you go too big,
yep,
the opportunity for a lot of those early round games to be one-sided and not nearly as dramatic or interesting exists. Like, there's a sweet spot, I think. And I know coaches don't want to, necessarily recognize that. I mean, on any given day, I guess someone can beat someone else, but the competitiveness and the uncertainty of it and the madness of it is because it's hard to get into, and those that get in are really good and can beat anybody on a given day.
Well, isn't that has to be a concern for you guys, because the madness is what makes the NCAA tournament. I was a ball boy for Homer Drew growing up. The Bryce Drew shot to me is like one of the iconic moments of my childhood, just seeing how that unfolded. Do you worry about maybe the health of mid-majors with the portal and with NIL? And we had a couple mid-major coaches on last week, and just hearing them talk about the concerns and the challenges they face, it's a real issue. So do you worry about maybe that level of madness and the level of play that gives us that madness?
I do. I mean, I think if you're following our sport, you have to wonder, where it's going to be in 5-10 years. So yeah, I mean, and that's why this is more complex than people make it out to be, because the other thing that the committee will consider, and they talked about last week, is what's the impact on the regular season? Right. Because they are stewards of the game, and while their responsibility is just the month of March, they care about the game from November through March. And like, let's just take, for example, and I'm not saying this is even anything that would be all that attractive right now, but let's say you had 96 teams in the field, right? And you're a high major. Why in the world would you play any tough games in November, December? Yeah. You wouldn't even consider playing a tough game in November, December, because you're essentially going to know you're in as long as you finish in the top, half or 2/3 even of your league. And so what does that impact on the regular season? And, we already fight for relevance during the end of the football season in November and December. We've had the benefit of MTEs and doubleheaders and, great events and conference matchups that bring compelling games to college basketball in November and December. expansion and the tournament has some impact on that. The encouragement of playing those tougher games in non-conference right now helps to schedule those games. And if there's not the incentive to do that to help you get into the tournament or be seeded, not sure what the unintended consequence of that could be.
What's been the biggest difference as Mark Emmert now is no longer the head of the NCAA to Charlie Baker coming in? Have you noticed anything from a college basketball standpoint with that?
Charlie's been great. He's a really smart guy. He's very passionate about this opportunity and what he thinks he can do to impact college sports. He is a former basketball player himself. You may recall he played at Harvard for a short time and loves the game. He's working on obviously bigger things than just basketball, and he loves all championships of sports. But he does understand the game and understands the importance of the game to the NCAA and to college sports overall. So I think he'll be a good advocate, for student athletes first and foremost. He's very focused on what benefits and what services can be provided to student athletes. And I think he'll be an advocate for coaches as well.
I'm a huge fan. Obviously, being here in Massachusetts.
Did you vote for him?
Well, I did not vote for him. But I love him. Love him. Seriously. You're not going to find too many better people than Charlie Baker. Like, to me, he just can unite people. And I think that's something that's important, not just with regards to whether it's college basketball, college athletics, just obviously where we're at in our country right now. So I love Charlie Baker. Spent some time with him at the Final Four, and just a really good guy. Who I think, again, you know what? I think the benefit of having Charlie Baker is I think he's a really good listener. And I know he's been out a ton since he took the job, and just trying to get as much information as he can to be able to try to make some informed, quality decisions. Because it's not easy. We know that. We gave Emmert a hard time, probably me more than anybody. I know it's a hard job, and I think Charlie's got an even tougher job. All right, so one of the things we want to talk to you about while we had you was the NCAA academies coming up here in Memphis at the end of the month. The men will play from the 24th to the 27th, and you added the women, 28th through the 31st. You did this, I think it was 2019.
That's right.
And it was okay. I went in stores. It was okay. Like, I like the setup and everything, Dan. The biggest criticism that people like me had was trying to get the high-end talent. Explain to me kind of, again, obviously it took some years off because of COVID, why you decided to do this again, and how it's maybe going to have a little bit of a different look and feel to it this time.
Sure. Well, thanks. I leave from Memphis tomorrow. I'll be there for the week. It's going to be a great week. Looking forward to it. The idea behind this really is to, more so than the play and the evaluation opportunity, is to engage directly with prospects and their parents. The NCAA is paying for the prospects' expenses to be there, and one chaperone intended to be a parent or someone important in their life that helps them make decisions, make better informed decisions. And it's a chance for the NCAA, as well as our partners, USA Basketball, as well as working with the NBA and the NBPA, to give direct information to prospects and their parents about what their future looks like, whether it's college basketball, professional opportunities, what the recruiting process is like, how to be eligible to play college basketball, what the NIL opportunities are, frankly, and what the transfer portal means and doesn't mean. On the NBA and PA side, they talk about the odds of making the NBA and what it takes. And, if you're a first-round pick, a second-round pick, or undrafted. So really giving direct information to prospects and their family members about their future, because it's so much more competitive now, right? With opportunities professionally at the high school level with OTE, G League Ignite, professional opportunities overseas. We really feel like we need to have a small space. It's only 4 days for both men and then women, to be able to share information directly with them at one point during their high school career so that they can have the most informed, direct information to make the best decision. Because it's important for college basketball. We are fighting and recruiting against other great opportunities. But we think this one's really important and good educationally, from an athletic standpoint. So that's why this effort has come back. Into your question, the first time we did it regionally in 4 different regions, thinking that was the best way to kind of get at prospects. But what we found is, with a lot of feedback from coaches, is it was hard to get around to different sites. So we're doing it in one site right now in Memphis. And we've added a team component to it. The USA Basketball will run the US Open Championship for U15 rising 9th graders and U16 or 9th and 10th graders. 24 teams each that qualified in the spring in different events. We've got teams from Under Armour, Adidas, Nike, independent tournaments. They qualified to be there. They're excited to be there. We think it will raise the talent level because there'll be more, kind of high level teams that will come. And then there's also the individual component if you didn't qualify as a member of a team. And we also have the Canada Junior National Team that will be part of the academy too. So we hope we've addressed a lot of the kind of questions and feedback we got around trying to attract the highest level talent. We'll find out better next week.
What's going to be the basketball breakdown? Is it, you mentioned the classroom aspect of that, and I think that's great to have that, but is it more instruction? Is it more playing games? You mentioned there's an individual way in and a team way in. Are these guys staying with their teams, or what is the basketball setup? Just curious.
Sure. Great question. So it's really just this time around games. So whether you're playing in the US Open Championship or playing in the individual college basketball academy, in that case, you'll be put on a team with players you don't know, right? Because you're coming from all over the country. We've got 40 different states and like 8 different countries that are going to be there. And they'll play 2 games a day. And then they'll also have the life skill sessions, which are actually mandatory if they want to get reimbursed for their travel expenses. Both the player and the chaperone have to attend because it's so central to the program that they get that information directly. And so in the US Open Championship, we'll have 2 games a day as well and determine a champion in both age groups. And, again, we think it's going to be a pretty cool evaluation opportunity for coaches and a great, experience for the players.
I like the fact that it's got some teaching and learning, because I think that's one of the disconnects to some degree for a lot of these kids when they transfer. Like, I'll give you a great example right now. You have the one-time transfer rule, and a lot of kids right now don't know whether they're going to get a waiver or not, whether they're, eligible or what that looks like. I think so many of these kids don't know who to reach out to in some ways, right? I'll get calls all the time from kids or AU coaches, and I'll just tell them, like, I don't know, they call the NCAA. They almost don't know who to call. And you hope things like this can give them that information where at least they feel comfortable. All right, here's the number, here's who I got to call, and they'll point me in the right direction to get that question answered. Because again, sometimes there's so much uncertainty with these kids right now. Again, with the one-time transfer waiver, you got coaches telling them, hey, go in the portal, you're going to be eligible. Then they go in the portal, and now they're looking at the coach and like, am I going to be eligible or not? Like, what? I didn't get the real info. I don't know who to talk to.
Yes. I mean, that's exactly right, Jeff. That's what we're trying to achieve here is a direct connection, real information, opportunity to follow up, with NCAA staff and have that information be available at a player's fingertips, or equally as importantly for their parents to know where to go to get answers.
Well, this sounds like it's better than the Nike All-America Camp guys sleeping through the classroom times.
That was you. But that was you, Rob. Let's be honest.
I was locked in. I was trying to soak it up. Dan, there's so much change in college basketball. We have NIL, we've got the portal, we have college coaches who are not happy about the recruiting timelines that they have in the summer of being out so much. And on top of that, we've got COVID giving players an extra year of eligibility for another year or 2 years. How do you feel the state of the game is? Do you feel like college basketball is in a healthy place?
I'd say from a management perspective for coaches and for institutions, it's shaky. I mean, it's very disruptive right now. I think, if you didn't acknowledge that, you're not being candid enough. I mean, there's just an awful lot going on right now, and it is hard to manage, both from a personal and professional perspective. I'm hopeful that over time it will find its level, and there will be some boundaries, some guidelines, some more structure that can be brought to it for everybody's benefit, not just the coaches and administrators, but for the players too. Because I think so much about the players left behind, right? Where transfer happens and there's still a team left at the departing institution that had hopes and dreams, and what kind of impact is some of their better players leaving have on them as a team. So it's a challenging time. I mean, and we're listening. We hear it. The NABC is working on potentially a proposal here to alter the recruiting calendar, to recognize that they, as coaches, and you guys have heard it probably even more than I have been working literally every single day and night since their season ended, right? And because they have had to, with transfer either in or out, trying to squeeze in a little evaluation at the high school level along the way. But here it is, late July, and rosters are still just becoming finalized, for the next year. So we're going to look at the transfer window. The council is, and there's a proposal right now to shorten it from 60 days to 30 days. And maybe even adjust the timing of that as well around the tournament. This year, transfer window opened up the day after Selection Sunday. There's some feedback around teams that were in the tournament that was disruptive and hard to manage, in March while their team was still playing for national championship. So there's still, things that can be determined and maybe help, Robbie, with that question and with that environment that is quite challenging to operate in right now. And hopefully with some more parameters, guideline, and some more experience around it, in the coming years, it'll be a little bit more manageable.
Another one I've heard lately from a bunch of coaches is the rule that they can only work with. It's funny, years ago it was they need more access to the kids in the summer. They got some. Now they want more, because they're saying, like, our kids are sitting around all day. There's not other students, and they want to work out. They want to work out more.
That was the right play. The fact that the coaches couldn't work us out when I was in school it just drove players to go work out at places where you don't want players to be. I mean, that was the right call. And just to say that as a part
and even more, wouldn't you want more than 4 hours, Rob? If you're a player, you'd rather work with your coaches, and your coaches, in most cases, to me, would rather be working with their players than going out every day on the road recruiting. You want to work with your current players more than I assume
the fear, and Dan can speak on this better than I can, would be that you'll have a staff that says, all right, 20 hours this week, or it's like worse than the season, right? Because there is nothing else to do.
There's a happy medium, isn't there?
No doubt. I think you need to find the middle.
Right.
Yeah, and we have to keep current. that rule, you talk has been in place now for a number of years. The 4 hours, the 8 hours. Is that still the right number of hours? Yes, we have to be careful that not crazy coaches won't start demanding 20, 24 hours in a week. But I don't know that 4 hours, 8 hours is as relevant contemporary anymore, given what other opportunities they have. And frankly, you guys may remember that just this spring we were considering seriously whether to add an opportunity to play a couple of exhibition or scrimmage games in the summer.
Yeah.
And ultimately we put it on kind of hold for right now because of all the things we just talked about in the NIL and transfer portal and everything else. There's just so much to manage right now. But one of the biggest and most interesting takeaways for me was 70% of players that we surveyed want to have an opportunity to play competitively in summer. 70%.
Yeah.
Because they realize, I think, that every other level of the game, whether it's, high school level or NBA summer league, guys are having an opportunity to play a little bit. And even if it just goes back to the summer league days of old, like they get tired of playing against themselves, right? And want to have something to look forward to. And frankly, in this day and age with NIL and everything, there may be an opportunity for exposure for them and financial opportunity in some way that doesn't exist because you can't, have that kind of exposure or competition in the summer. Now, again, we need to be careful. I'm not talking about adding a number of games, but the proposal was for 2, and and it'd be like over the next couple of weeks.
You sound like you kind of like it, right?
I do. I do. I think, as I think about opportunities for players, marketing and promoting the game, college basketball basically goes dark from the draft, because you get some glow in the draft, right, with so many college players that are in that process, until preseason practice starts in September, October. Like, it's just non-existent. And yet we know that most every single player is on their college campus, going to summer school, working out every day, having a good experience, but they're like lost and forgotten. And I think some small opportunity to tell their story, to tell the story, like, especially in light of all the roster changes that happen. I mean, how cool would it be to be able to see what's Purdue's team going to look like here, for a weekend, just for maybe late July or early August, like 1 or 2 games, they scrimmage somebody or play, something to benefit charity or even just have, something to do with the Purdue community.
How about you do a bid on the line? Hey, Dan, how about we have a bid on the line or something? Do something, seriously, do something really creative. I mean,
talk about up in the ante here, from playing a random summer game to now Jeff wants a bid on the line. And
that's the only way I'd watch. That's
why are you so anti this? You go to Iowa and you still hear Iowa fans talk about the Iowa Summer League, watching guys like BJ Armstrong and Bobby Hansen and players from Northern Iowa and Drake. Or even if you made it into a 3-on-3 deal and had what is your issue with this, Jeff?
No, I think you're right. Like, I don't have much of an issue with it. The only thing I would say is it's like, the haves and the have-nots, where the haves, the Dukes, the Kentuckys, the Kansases, are going to sell it out. They're going to get even more NIL, where, let's face it, like Boston College does something in the summer, nobody's showing up. So I just don't know how fair, but I guess, listen, nothing's fair. Nothing's fair. So I just think it would be, actually, more thinking it through, it would be cool to do like some 3-on-3 deal, because it would be different. Like, I just think if I'm looking at the same deal where you're playing everybody 20 minutes a game and I'm going to the Bahamas in 2 weeks, I'm going to see, Iowa State and Creighton and some of those teams over there. And I'm not like looking forward to watching them play. I'm looking forward to hitting the lazy river and playing blackjack. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Work trip, huh?
Yeah.
No, it's not a work trip. It's a trip to spend with my daughter, and the only way I'm getting her somewhere is to make it fun. So that's kind of what I'm doing there. Hey, Dan, here's one. You and I have talked about this forever. And you kind of alluded to it earlier of taking away, if you expand the tournament, taking away some of these big November games. My thing has been, and I've been banging this drum for a while now, like, why can't we have one big boy game especially Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I guess it's a Thursday football game, but whatever. The days, no, you don't want to go up against Monday Night Football necessarily. But other than that, in November and even early December, we're fine because you have some of the challenges. Yeah. But every night in November, like, I want like 2 big boy games. Like, I don't want just one. I want 2 games where you're like, I have to, and every team should kind of rotate having to play that. Maybe not every year. Maybe play one home 1 year, then you take a year off, then you, or maybe play road the next year, and then you're off for a couple of years. But there's like, I don't know, 40 programs that should be involved in this. It should be mandated. Now, if you're on the hot seat, maybe you get off that. You don't have to play. But I don't know. I just think people got to think for the good of the game, playing somebody early in the season like this.
Yeah, you and I both are violently in agreement with that. I mean, I think we're missing an opportunity. You know, we had the Champions Classic on opening night before it moved, you know, a week later this year, and it sounds like it's going to stay there. But even that was only just Tuesday night. It didn't, nothing really filled in on Wednesday or Thursday. And, you know, look, you know, you give credit and compliment to the NBA. You know, when they start their season on Tuesday, they have a doubleheader Tuesday, another one on Wednesday, another one on Thursday. And so for fans, you know, it's a great way to start the season with big time matchups and you know, great brands, and ESPN and Warner Bros. Discovery do a great job covering those games. And you know, we have more teams. There's no reason why we can't have similar opportunity, but it's going to have to be a collaborative effort with coaches, with conferences probably, and certainly with network partners.
I was going to say, is it more on networks, do you think, Dan? Like, yeah, I know you don't want to point fingers. You think it's more?
I don't think so, because no, I mean, they'll take a good matchup any night, especially without competition. No, Tuesday and Wednesday night, there's not much competition. Thursday has the Amazon NFL game, but you know, I don't think that's it. I think it's more coaches, frankly, you know.
It's sad. It's sad, to be honest. Like, certain guys will do it, and then there's other guys that just, you know, again, like, to me, you know, you got to be able to understand what's good for the sport. And most of these coaches, a lot of them, let's face it, they've got plenty of stability right now. Again, the ones that don't, I'm not going to go like, hey, that's your prerogative. If you're on the hot seat, something like that, I get it. But like Rick Pitino this year or next year at St. John's, play somebody on November 7th or 8th, whatever that date's going to be, that Tuesday or Wednesday. Set it up. Play Richard. I don't care. Do something fun, something big that people are going to want to watch.
That St. John's Mexico game, that's just what the fans of college hoops are
waiting for. All right, fine. Play Calipari. How's that? St. John's, Kentucky.
I think that'd be good.
I'd watch that one, wouldn't you?
Yes, I would.
Right. Everybody would.
Getting back,
the three of us are going to watch any game. Yeah, we're probably a bad audience, but the three of us are going to watch any game, and Robbie's probably going to call on one of them. So
that is true. Dan, how do you see? And I know it's impossible to see into the future here, but as conference realignment kind of shows itself here, and we get Oklahoma and Texas moving to the Big 12, and we get USC and UCLA coming to the Big 10. How does that impact the sport? How does that impact the NCAA tournament? And do you think this is just the tip of the iceberg here for more people to leave?
Yeah, I mean, long term, I don't think conference realignment is done. I'm not making a prediction in that way, but you know, I used to work at the old Big East Conference, and you know, conference realignment's been going on now for well over a decade, and I don't think it's done yet. So I do think it's a very good question, and honestly, in my mind, some of the consideration around expansion of the tournament has to take that into consideration, or at least the selection, seeding, and bracketing criteria, because leagues that are of 16 teams rather than 10 or 12 teams present a different team profile potentially. And you know, you use two really good examples of, you know, more often than not, Texas and Oklahoma, USC and UCLA are NCAA tournament teams, right? Not every year, but more often than not, right? And they're going into leagues where they already have an awful lot of NCAA tournament teams, like a third to a half of the league generally gets in. So what gives? Like, is it going to be, you know, one team replaces another, or if they're all good enough, are you going to have more teams out of larger leagues? Just by the simple math of playing conference games, you're likely going to have more teams that have a 500 or lower record in conference games only. So what does that mean? There's no policy against taking teams with a losing conference record right now, and we see it every year, frankly. But we may see more of that in the future. We may see more quality teams with 500 or below records in conference play. So all that, I think, has to be taken into consideration, Robbie. It's a really good question, and it's been on my mind for some time. I'm not saying what the outcome of that is going to be, but I think we need to continue to keep the tournament selection process relevant and contemporary to what is going on in college basketball. And if one of the things going on in college basketball is much larger leagues with more conference games, the committee has to consider that. Again, I'm not saying what it's going to consider, but it's not going to be like it was 5 years ago, 5 years from now. So what does that mean in terms of how we select, seed, and bracket the field?
Hey, Dan, I'm going to channel my analytic nerd deal here, which I'm not. I'm the furthest thing from an analytics guy. But in the spirit of Matt Norlander, I'm going to ask you: Will you ever divulge the actual formula for the net? Like I've actually thought about that, and again, for me to think about that is crazy because I wouldn't know what to do if you gave me the formula. But I do think it's interesting that a lot of people don't know kind of what that formula is, how the net's made up. Is there any thought of kind of giving everybody the secret sauce to the net?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess yes, because there's no effort to be nothing short of transparent. The complicating factor as it relates to the net is that there's not just a simple formula like the RPI. You know, the net was developed through artificial intelligence, which we're all learning an awful lot more about here recently. And so I'm not sure there's a simple way to say, okay, here's the X, Y that makes up the net. We could do, I think, admittedly, a better job of communicating what the components of the net are, what makes it up, and we're working on that, frankly, because that kind of transparency and communication is really important to understanding what the tools are the committee uses. And it's just one tool, but it's not an insignificant one, and we recognize that. And but again,
like the efficiency, like Dan.
Yeah.
Like I know you guys have the scoring margin capped at 10, but
we don't anymore. No, we don't anymore. No.
So nothing's capped.
No,
so that's why you'll see teams running it up, like especially at all times during the year. But like if you've got a chance in a bye game to put in your walk-ons at the end of the game, you're up 40 for the last 3, 4, 5 minutes, whatever it is, or keep your starters or somebody in there. It's more advantageous for you to keep your starters in there and win by 40 and also get your efficiency numbers even better, correct?
Not necessarily, but coaches do believe that, and I'm not, that's just the reality of it because they're concerned about putting their team in the best position to be, selected and seeded for the tournament. But it's a net efficiency number, so it depends on what your points per possession is offensively and versus points per possession defensively. So there's diminishing returns too in the scoring margin. Significant diminishing returns, and it's also corrected for quality of opponent. So if you're running the score on a team that's ranked 300, it doesn't have nearly the kind of impact as if you're win by a large margin off a team that's in the top 30 in that. So again, one of those things we probably could do a better job of communicating about because there is kind of a misunderstanding about the impact of scoring and margin and all, and efficiency is only essentially half of the formula. The other half is results oriented only. It doesn't matter what the score of the game is or what the efficiency is. It's who'd you play, where'd you play, and how'd you do.
Perfect.
It's amazing how sensitive we all got in the United States about like point differential, whereas overseas in pro games, point differential matters, and you could be up 20 and you're trying to score at the end because you know it will matter down the line. And I get the sportsmanship aspect of it, but here it's like such a taboo thing to do. And over there, it's normal. It's normal to do that.
Hummel loves running it up.
Yes.
He would do it on me. I mean, listen.
I would.
If it was Hummel versus me in one-on-one, he'd try to beat me by 100, Dan. But I don't think he can. I don't think he can anymore. I think he could have pre-injury. Now, if you've seen him jump, listen, I think I could hang with Hummel.
Jeff didn't even play high school basketball, and he's making these claims.
Doesn't matter. I still think I could fight you. You're soft.
The question is, why does Robbie need to jump to beat you by 100?
That's a great question, Dan. If you can shoot, you don't need to jump. And luckily, Jeff, I still can shoot. I can still.
All right. With that, we're gonna let Dan get out here so he doesn't have to deal with our banter. Dan Gavitt, We appreciate you taking some time in the summer. Enjoy the rest of your off season if you have one here, and hope to see you soon. Rob, always good seeing you. Enjoy the TBT. I almost said TNT games. TBT games. I'll be watching you, and don't work too hard.
Appreciate you guys. Good to see you.
Thank you for watching the Field of 68. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here, hit that like button, share this link with your friends, or check out the description for some other places that you can